Okay, so now we'll talk about the neuroplasticity. The neuroplasticity is generally a capability of our brain to adapt to changed conditions, generally speaking. Of course, the most interesting part of it is that neuroplasticity is also about the proliferation of the neurons that was suspected to be impossible. However, still, what we are thinking mainly about when we are talking about neuroplasticity, we think mainly about this that we have here. So modify intrinsic connectivity. So generally, uh, building up new synapses, changing those synapses, uh, be also able to respond to disease or injury. So changing those synapses, for example, in a way to omit the part that was broken, things like that. It's also tightly connected to such phenomena as long-term potentiation and long-term depression. That you already remember about such things from physiology, at least partly. So those long-term potentiation and long-term depression, what does it mean? As you remember, the action potential is the rapid change of the voltage of the potential of the cell that is easier to invoke when the potential of the cell is higher than in the opposite case. Yes, so generally the potential is negative normally, but it can be higher or lower. It depends, for example, on action of the inhibiting and activatory synapses. So those synapses will regulate what would be the voltage of the cellular memory of the neuron. The long-term potentiation and short-term potentiation is about the situation that this potential is changed for long. Because as we were learning about the inhibitory and stimulatory synapses, they change the potential, but for very, very, very short duration of time. In case of this long-term potentiation and depression, it lasts far longer. And this is this is also very important part of the neuroplasticity. Okay. So generally, we are also focusing on pruning here. What is pruning? Generally, some neurons dies. Yes, some synapses also are destroyed. And this process, this intentional death of some neuron, this intentional destruction of some synapses is called pruning. It occurs a couple times during the life, especially during when you are young. Yeah. Okay. The activity-dependent plasticity of the spinal cord. So, you know already that the plasticity is generally good. The plasticity enables us to cope with changing situations. These changing situations may be just understood as learning new skills. Yes, so learn to play basketball, for example, anything. But these changing situations may be also understood as adapting to the disease that we acquired. Also, to, for example, learning how to cope with a stroke. So after stroke, part of the brain is destroyed. Dot. Nothing can be done about this part of the brain. But other parts of the brain can be retrained in order to get back some of the capabilities. So it's good, obviously. So how to boost it? Yes, how to increase the neuroplasticity? how to enable a person to increase his or her capabilities after the trauma, for example, after the spinal cord trauma, for example. So this is a very interesting question. Yes, can we increase production of new synapses? Also, to some extent, production of new neurons in the patients that are severely ill. Yes, we can. So, for example, there was some research that after the spinal cord image, when we add some sensory inputs, for example, through the Golgi tendon organs, so when we move the limb generally, this impulsation from the receptors may lead to increased neuroplasticity. Also hip extension positions, so we have some specific positions, mainly it's connected to some positional reflexes that are connected to walking, and that we have some reflexes, some primitive reflexes still in body. But this presentation is rather general idea about this. I will not teach you how to do a physiotherapy. I will just give you the theoretical basis. So these sensory neurons signals are interpreted by a network of spinal interneurons referred as a central pattern generator. So generally they're interpreted. Yes, we get some input, some data, some sensory data, and they need to be processed by the spinal cord because after the trauma it cannot reach the brain. There are also some guidelines. What are the guidelines? The guidelines, previous time I was talking about the evidence-based medicine. Generally, evidence-based medicine, from the practical perspective, looks like that. That somebody does this research that I told you about. Some other person analyzes this statistically. Then some other person gets couple of similar researches of this statistical analysis of the couple researches. Then he or she combines those researches into meta-analysis. And then on the basis of this meta-analysis, experts are creating guidelines. Guidelines are the most important thing generally when you are looking for some practical knowledge. They are generally better than books, yes, if such guidelines exist, of course. Because not all, for most of the topics, I could even say, there are no guidelines. But for a lot of topics, especially those most important things, there are some guidelines. And if you are looking for some best, newest knowledge, generally look for those guidelines because they are processing in a very good, very scientifically sound manner the information from the research to give some concrete advice how to deal with things. So here, for example, I found some guidelines how to increase neuroplasticity. So we can maximize loading, for example, of the lower limb instead of the upper extremities during the training. Also, some aerobic exercises may improve the brain function after the stroke, for example. We can generally, the physiotherapy can also increase the levels of the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. This is one of the one of the substances that will increase the neuroplasticity. So you want to have it as much as possible. Okay, thank you.